Well, hello out there, YouTube. This is Stephen Meade for Domicile Real Estate, where we are on a mission to help California's renters become homeowners. This is Real Talk, which basically is my excuse to rant about anything I feel like. And this week, kind of something that is a little near and dear to my heart. And I just want to say, like, where do we get the ideas for these videos? Well, honestly, these are based on conversations that we have with our clients. And a lot of times they're very useful conversations. And we think they might be useful for people other than just that particular client. So we put them together. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about buyers, especially first-time home buyers, which is a topic near and dear to my heart. We love first-time home buyers. I truly believe in homeownership as a thing. I think it's great for communities. I think it's great for people as individuals too. So there are three things that buyers tend to want in a market. And we're going to go over these, right? So when you ask buyers, describe your perfect home buying market, these are the three things that people tend to talk about. And I'm going to tell you why making your decisions based on this is not good and will lead you down the road of trouble in a very big hurry. So the first thing people are looking at is low interest rates, right? Like, and I get it. I like low interest rates. Payments are less with low interest rates, but believe it or not, low interest rates are not always great if you're a buyer. And I'll tell you a little bit more about why that is. The second thing that people want is people want low prices, right? Like, I like low prices when I'm buying things. If it's cheaper, it's even better. In fact, some of my friends even call me a little bit on the cheap side. But there's a little caveat to this one. Home buyers aren't just looking for low prices in the absolute sense. They are looking for low prices in the relative sense. And what do I mean by relatively low prices? Well, combined with the prices, what they really want is the expectation that prices will go up from wherever they are. Like, they want that expectation that prices will rise in the future. We're going to talk about that in a second. And then the third thing that home buyers want is they want lots of selection. And if you've been a home buyer in the last 2 years, you have not gotten that. So I'm going to have to give you some terrible news that may be a shock to your system, but you probably need to hear it. You are not going to get all three of those things at the same time. Markets do not exist where those three things are there at the same time, at least not for very long. And even when those three things do exist for a short period of time, home buyers are not usually in a position to see it. They only see it after the fact and wish they had bought. So in fact, you might be sitting out there and be one of those people right now thinking, why didn't I buy a home at the beginning of the pandemic? That would have been great, right? And the reason why you didn't buy a home at the beginning of the pandemic is because of relative prices. You thought prices were going to go down at the beginning of the pandemic, and then they didn't. So we're going to push that stuff aside, and we're going to talk about why even using this kind of line of reasoning is not really a great way to go. And the biggest reason is that human beings are biased decision makers. And probably the biggest bias that affects home buyers, and we're gonna throw up a quote here on the board. So I think Cassandra's gonna edit that in for this one. And that is, things are never as bad or as good as they seem. And as a human being, your brain is predisposed to overemphasize the things that are right in front of you. And for a lot of decisions, right, like if someone is attacking you, if you're feeling pleasure, these things might actually be good, right, to overemphasize what's right in front of you. When making decisions about home buying and real estate, it is not good. You do not want to overemphasize the information that is right in front of you. And how do we see this practically on the ground? Well, practically on the ground, what this means is that when things are bad, people feel like they're bad, they're never going to get better. And when things are good, people feel like they are great and they are never going to go bad. And guess what? We work in a world with cycles, so neither of those statements is true. If things are good, they will not stay that way forever. And if they're bad, just wait, things will also change. So let's give a good example of this because, looking backwards through our lens of history, the very best time to have bought a home in recent history was in the middle of 2012. This was really the bottom of the market. Interest rates were in the threes, and you had tons of properties to choose from. And yet, not until the latter half of that year did anybody really buy in numbers. The market was very slow in 2012 until the end of the year, and then prices started accelerating upward, and that created kind of a snowball effect, right? People changed their view on prices, and the reason why that is you have to remember what 2012 was like. We had just spent 4 years in the Great Recession, and nobody believed that prices were going to get better. They were tired of being told it was the bottom of the market. And so many people missed out on what really was historically a great opportunity because they weren't able to see it at the time. So if you're not basing your decisions on are interest rates low, are prices low, and is there tons of selection, how do you make your decisions in real estate? Well, it's all about strategy. You give me any combination of those three qualities in the market, and I can develop a strategy for you. So I'm going to start with the way things are right now. I would say prices today are neutral. And I know that might take a little bit of flack, but I'm going to back that up and I'm going to give you a reason why I believe that to be true. Interest rates are relatively high, right? Like this is a high point of the last 20 years. I actually think that's a positive for some people, and I'm going to tell you why. And selection is actually pretty good. So it's not the best that it's been, but it's pretty good. So what is the right strategy in a market like this? Well, a couple things to understand. Rates are at a 20-year high. What does that tell me about rates? I have a feeling that in the next 10 years, there's a very high probability that rates will be less than they are today at some point in the next 10 years. I'm not going to tell you when or try to predict that, but I think if you gave me a runway that was 10 years long, there's going to be a point in time where it will be beneficial to refinance and rates will be lower than they are today. So that gives you two advantages. Advantage number one is that you could buy a home today, and whatever your payment is today, there's a good chance you will be able to live in the same house with a lower payment in the future. At some point over 10 years, your payment will go down, right? This is the opposite of rent, which generally either stays the same or goes up. It doesn't really go down very much or for very long. The second reason why relatively high interest rates are a good thing is that if you have a market that is stable, and what I mean by stable is we've got a supply and demand equilibrium at a higher interest rate level, that gives you room to have price increases and appreciation that is fueled by dropping interest rates. In fact, that describes a lot of price appreciation over the last 20 years was in fact the result of interest rates going downward, allowing for prices to increase. So it means if the market can find an equilibrium at the current level of interest rates, and if they don't go up dramatically, that means there's actually a lot of room for those interest rates to grow down and to fuel appreciation, which to me is the reason why I think today's prices are neutral. The other thing I want to talk about is selection, right? Many of you know this because you watch our videos. There are two things that I love in real estate. Item number one is homeownership and the idea of homeownership, which is what we're talking about. But the second thing is architectural homes. And if you want a home that is special, a low inventory environment is not good for you. It means your likelihood of getting something that you love is less. The more inventory there is, the likelihood of you finding something that really strikes the right chord with you goes up and is higher. So if you're the kind of person where what you buy really matters to you, a high inventory environment is the place that you want to be in. The other thing that's great about a higher inventory environment is that if you are a first-time home buyer, you will find that your ability to purchase homes is higher. So, we're in a marketplace now where you can do things like write an offer and ask for closing cost credits. That's not always the case. Before we end, I'm going to give you one final piece of advice. And this is something that I think I have told nearly every single one of my clients over the last 15 years at some point in time. And that is buy a home that people want. And that sounds like a really funny piece of advice to give people. Like that sounds obvious. And yet, frequently people do not do that. Frequently people buy a home because they think it's a good deal. People buy a home because they can get a lot for their money in a particular area. You want to buy a house that is located in a place where people want to be. And I say this because that basically gets you a much lower level of volatility. So this means homes that are in climates that are desirable, homes that are in accessible places with employment centers nearby, even with a large work from home movement. We're still seeing a lot of people really need to be at least close-ish to civilization. You want to buy a home that has some inherent desirability and value to it. And, that means some things in this market that look like great deals, I feel like aren't. And I don't want to call anything out specifically. I try to keep this positive for the most part, but there are certain types of properties being built that I think don't have a lot of inherent desirability. We know this because when they're brand new, they sell well. And as soon as they're 3 years old, buyers do not want them anymore and they're a tough sell. The other thing that we're seeing a lot in this market, and I'm starting to see this, and people are sending this stuff to me, is we are seeing new home builders do very aggressive financing. And when they do very aggressive financing, that sounds like a great deal, right? Like they promise you 3% interest rate, and that means you have a lower payment. What they are secretly doing is getting you to pay significantly above the market for the house for something that will likely go away as soon as you buy the house. Now, I'm not saying that your 3% interest rate will go away. That might still remain. But when you go to sell that home, the next person is not getting 3%. So they're going to value that home much lower. So I'm seeing this out there. I don't think it's a good move for people in the long run. But really, that's what this comes about. When people focus on particular market attributes, price point, interest rates, level of inventory, what you're really doing is you're focusing on the short run. And that really isn't serving long-term you. Homeownership is about doing things and making great decisions for 10 and 20 years from now you. That's the person that you're serving when you do this, not 3 months from now you. So I always tell people to try to remember that and try to look a little farther down the road. And it's hard to do. Our brains are pre-wired to look at what is right in front of us and weigh that far more heavily than things 10 years down the line. But with a little bit of practice, you can get over that hump and you can make better real estate decisions. I hope you've enjoyed this. We enjoy making these videos. Finally, one thing I'm going to say is, of course, if you are looking to purchase or sell a home in Southern California, absolutely reach out to us. This is what we do, and we would love to lend our expertise. Do not forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. And questions and comments, as always, we love them. So keep them coming. We'll see you again real soon.